Webinar. Hello and welcome to today's webinar by Philanthropia about individual giving. Thank you so much to all of you that you're here today and join us for this important topic, because as I think we all are getting to feel that the institutionalized donor landscape has come under a lot of pressure in the last months, in the last 1 or 2 years. And it's getting more and more difficult to get supporters in the foundation sphere or even in the public sphere. Individual giving and support by individuals is becoming more and more important, and in my opinion, should always be one pillar in the fundraising mix of organizations, so that you can, achieve a little bit more stability, a little bit more diversity in your fundraising mix, so that you don't depend on one source of money only. So I think this is a very, very important topic today, and I'm really glad that I have the chance to address this with you, and that we will go through it. If you have any questions for me, the chat is open, so you can use the chat box to talk to each other. If you have questions for me at the end that you want me to address, I would ask you to use the Q&A box, which should be somewhere next to the chat as well, because sometimes the chat gets very crowded. People interact with each other, exchange contact, etc. So then it's difficult for me to actually find and see the questions in the end. So if you have a question that you want me to address, I would ask you to use the Q&A box for that. And there is 10 to 15 minutes for this at the end of the session. So any question you have, you can ask me and let me know by the end. Okay, but then we can jump right in, I think. My name is Eva Wieners. If you've attended one of our prior webinars, probably you already know me because I do most of them. I've been working in the field of fundraising for almost 15 years now with Philanthropia. I think it's coming up on 10 years actually, which is a very, very long time. And I have worked in Nepal and Ecuador with grassroots organizations. My PhD is in the sustainability of project planning. So all of this working with grassroots NGOs, trying to figure out sustainable ways of financing projects has been the focus of my work in the last 15 years. So to get started, I have a question for you. Maybe you can use the chat and just let me know if you have fundraised from individuals before, if you have actively done either a crowdfunding campaign or collected donations from members, from people that have maybe attended your events, etc. Maybe you can just type yes or no in the chat, so that I can kind of get a picture of the level of experience that you have, if you are familiar with this way of raising funds, if this is something that you're already doing, or if this is new to your organization. Okay, so there's some that say yes, but very little. Maybe some of you can still also share. I think this is very common that particularly organizations in the Global South maybe don't have such a strong individual donations framework. But like I said, I think it is very important to move into that direction, because we've seen over the last couple of months, and especially over the last, since the beginning of this year, the volatility of partners that we maybe thought were reliable partners in the past, and that we thought would be there for the long run, partners like USAID and the big development organizations, but also some foundations that have become unreliable partners. I mean, USAID has disappeared. Many foundations are feeling the struggles as well, because they receive many more applications than before. foundations that I've talked to say that they have an up to 10-fold increase in applications that they get. So 10 times more applications than last year. I think due to the fact that there is more stress in the market, that everybody feels that they need to ramp up their fundraising activities, their resource mobilization activities, but also due to AI, it has become so much easier to write a proposal, or at least something that looks like a good proposal, not necessarily with the great contents of a proposal, but it has become much easier. So more people are doing it, and the pressure on the foundation sector has become much higher. So that is why I believe that individual giving is one way out. I also know that, of course, individual giving is not going to replace institutionalized fundraising if you have established that in your organization within a short period of time, because often it takes a long time to develop these kinds of networks that you need for individual giving. And also the amount of money you get is much smaller than the amount of money that you would get with a proposal. But I think it's more sustainable. And also, even if you do write proposals and apply for grants, etc., you always need to have your own contribution. And I know that that is very difficult for many organizations to come up with that 10%, 5%, 15%, whatever it is that you do have to contribute. So if you have a strong network from individual supporters, that can help with that as well. So I think there's multiple reasons why we should never overlook this opportunity, and why we should, take this opportunity to make our fundraising a bit more sustainable and put it on more shoulders than just one or two. We will go through the, sorry, me and Zoom, we're not on the best terms at the moment. So sometimes if I'm distracted, I'm just trying to figure out what it wants me to do. But I think I got it now. We have different types of donors that you probably all know. Maybe you're not working with all of those kinds of donors, specifically if you're a small organization. But it's good to just have an overview. We have bilateral donors. They are the big ones. USAID, well, to delete that now, but the big organizations that usually work with governments. Oftentimes that kind of funding is very, very difficult to access, especially by small grassroots NGOs. Then we have multilateral donors like UN agencies, World Bank, European Commission. Still very competitive, very structured, very high-end. Private foundations are becoming a more important partner, I think. Those are the big ones, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I think we also have to look at this because I think it's not Bill and Melinda anymore. I think we have Bill and we have Melinda. Or the Ford Foundation, big foundations like that, MacArthur. There's smaller ones as well that could be great partners for small NGOs that often fund projects abroad. There's a lot of foundations out there. If you want to learn more about how to find those foundations, I can recommend you look at our donor research courses, because that is what we talk about in those courses. There's, I think, in the US alone, more than 150,000 foundations that could be partners. Then we have corporate donors. Those are companies that donate to causes, and they are very interesting. Also, when we talk about individual donors, that kind of overlaps, because sometimes if it's a big company, they have a CSR, a corporate social responsibility division. That is very structured. You have to write a proposal. It's like that. But if you are talking to the local business in your community, that is also corporate fundraising, but that is something that could work very well for you. And in that case, if we're also talking about small amounts, maybe a couple of $100 or in the low thousands, I would count that towards individual giving, because the same techniques you would use talking to an individual donor, an individual, you would use to talk to the business owner in your community. So that, I think, is a target group that you should really keep in mind. Then we have individual donors, that's what we're talking about today. Private individuals, you can access them either through your own network, your social media, a crowdfunding platform and campaign. There's different ways to access those people. Then we have faith-based or religious organizations that donate money and support projects and charitable causes. Often they're very regionally focused, and you can sometimes only benefit if you're from the same group, but not always. And then we have grassroots donors, peer-to-peer campaigns, community events. Those also count towards what I would say are individual donors. So we look at those categories specifically today. And usually when we talk about strategy development in resource mobilization, we always advise to have a mix of fundraising channels, types of donors. Because if you just get your money from one donor, from one type of donor, or even worse, just from one donor, you always run the risk if something happens, if they drop out for whichever reason, political reasons, financial reasons, then you're left with nothing. So if you depended on US aid for 100% of your budget, now those organizations are in deep, deep trouble, as you've probably experienced either yourself or with your peer organizations. If you just depend on one foundation and one day they decide, oh, we're going to change our focus, then you're left with nothing. So what we always recommend during the process of strategy development is to have different kinds of donors that support your work. So all those different mixes kind of, I always call it diversifies the risk. That means if one drops out, you still have the others. Of course, a huge proposal will probably not be replaced by local donors just because they don't have that financial capacity. But still, you're not left with nothing. You still have all those other channels that you can then build on. So when we talk about strategy, we always recommend a mix of all these types of donors. Of course, not all of them, but the ones that are a good fit for you, that are a good fit for your circumstances. And that way, you will never fall back onto zero if someone drops out. So what is individual giving? We've said the term a couple of times now. Now we're moving towards a definition. Individual giving is basically, like the term says, what is given by individuals, by individual people from the society. And if we look at charitable giving globally, 72% of it comes from individuals. So not from big foundations, not from governments, not from corporations as a corporation, but from individuals who make the decision to support a cause. Charitable giving is something else than grants. So the amount of grants given out is still bigger, but that's not included in charitable giving. Charitable giving means to give a donation without asking anything in return. So that could be given by a company, by a foundation as well. But out of this amount, 72% is given by individuals. So we should think of ways how to address individuals, how to talk to them, and how to access this potential. So like we said, individuals are the largest source of charitable giving worldwide. And so I know the data in a lot of detail in Germany because we've just had a new report come out. In Germany, we have 5 billion euros every year that come in through charitable donations. So yeah, if you compare that to grant money, that's not much, but it still is a huge chunk of money that is divided to all those NGOs working in Germany, and some depend to a degree of almost 80% on those private donations and not that much on grants because it works so well for them. There's lots of research and statistics that you can look at how much people donate. So in Europe, average giving as a share of income is at 0.64%. So that means that on average in Europe, every person donates 0.64% of their income to a charity or an organization. I know in Germany, well, here it says in the UK, 50% donated to charity in 2025. I know in Germany, that is way down to 27%. And that's one of the biggest problems that we have. 20 years ago, that number was at 50 or 60%, and it went down drastically. So that means organizations have not really found a way to address people in a way that they want to be addressed. But again, looking at the other side of the coin, that means there's lots and lots of potential, because in other societies, it's still 50%, and that is probably the value that is considered normal for a society, that 50% of people give money. So in Canada, that sits at 38, Australia 60%. So you can see it's around that value. Half of people are open to give, and if they are addressed the right way and if it's framed in the right way, they probably will give. Within the big group of individual donors, we have different groups that are, again, put into categories. And when you think about developing a strategy on how to address individual donors, you need to look at those categories in detail, because every one of those groups needs a very different approach. You can't approach a major donor the same way that you would approach a small grassroots donor. So you need to really understand what these people want to achieve with their donation, and you need to really understand, what kind of channel you can find them on, and how you can address them. So the first category is we have small or grassroots donors, whatever you want to call them. They give modest amounts. Often that happens nowadays through online channels or through a campaign. And they are motivated by a cause connection, or they just feel moved by whatever is shared in that moment. The cost of signing up a first-time donor is very high, because you have to, it's like in marketing, they are cold contact. You kind of have to reach out cold. You have to find a way to get them interested in your causes, in your issues, and you have to find a way, to connect with them. So the cost is relatively high. So what we always want to do is, if we have attracted small donors, we want to convert them into this fifth category, into a recurring donor. They give money monthly, annually, through autopay, and that is what forms your stable donor data, your donor base. Because if you have someone who gives you 100 euros through a campaign, that's great. But if you have someone who gives you 10 euros every month on a stable base, and you know that person is probably going to give the same amount next year and the same amount in 2 years, that gives you stability to plan with those $100. If they just come through a campaign, it's still great, of course, but it doesn't give you that planning security. What you want to achieve is that ideally your first-time donors also become recurring donors, and that is kind of one of the most difficult fields in fundraising. But once they have donated to you one time, they are not a cold contact anymore, so it's less intensive to kind of transfer them into that recurring donor category. But that is something that you really want to push. Then we have mid-level and major donors. They contribute larger gifts. And how much money or how big gifts is the definition for mid-level and major? That depends on your organization. I know organizations that say anything above 500 until 1,000 is mid-level, and over 1,000 is a major donor for us, because our budget, if you have a budget of $10,000 a year and someone gives you 1,000, well, that's 10% of your budget. That's huge. But if you're a big organization, your budget is 10 million, $1,000 is not that huge anymore. So for those, 1,000 is maybe mid-level, and a major donor would have to give more than 10,000. So, or maybe sometimes even higher amounts. It depends a lot on your organization, how you define those categories. And I think you don't really need a category of mid-level donors. It's nice to have, but of course it's also a lot of work, because all of these categories need a different way of addressing. But you need to make the distinction between what is a small donor and what is a major donor for us. And again, that can be a major donor, someone who gives more than 500, more than 100, more than 1,000, whatever it is. Because usually you would, for a small donor, someone who gives you $50, ideally you would write them a thank you note, but that can be automated, that can be an automatic email. It can be at the end of the year, a letter saying thank you, etc. I think nobody is mad if they get something automated if they gave $50. But if someone gives you 2,000, they probably expect you to write a personal note. They expect you to maybe give them a call and say, oh, wow, thank you, it's so great. So you need to treat these different categories differently. So you need to make some kind of distinctions for your organization. What is major donor and what is a small donor? Just so that you know and you have a system on how to address these people. And then we have legacy donors, and those are people, and it depends a bit on the culture and also on the legal system in your country, that give through their will. Through their inheritance. When they die, instead of leaving everything to their children or to the state, if they don't have children or don't have family, they leave part of their inheritance to organizations. That is actually very common and a very quickly growing field here in Europe. But I also know that in different countries, the system is different. The legal system is different. Sometimes you can't make those decisions because it's all given by law that you have to leave your inheritance to your children or to your family. So it depends on the situation in your country. But if you are able to establish a connection with someone, and a very strong connection, the willingness to leave something behind is often there and often very big. So why is individual giving important? It gives you flexible and unrestricted funds, which is great. I know many of you are always looking for unrestricted funds, because if you apply for a grant, you have to spend that money, or at least 90% of that money, for that specific project, which of course is good if you want to implement a project, but you also have rent to pay, you have maybe other expenses that you need paid, you have salaries, etc. And donations, usually you can, they are unrestricted, so you can spend them, obviously not for anything you want. You need to spend them on the work that you have advertised, but it's not that strictly tied to a project. There's some distinctions. So if you run a crowdfunding campaign and you promote a specific project and you get donations where you have to spend that money on that specific project, it's always what you promise to the donors that you also have to fulfill. But with a specific wording, you can also achieve the situation that it's completely unrestricted. The good thing about reaching individual donors is also that it builds community ownership and advocacy, because when you reach out to a bigger group of people, and you try to connect with them, to make them supporters, you inform them about your cause, and you make them part of the organization to some degree. If they've given to you for 1 or 2 years, or bigger amounts, or even small amounts, they will feel like they're part of the solution for that problem you're tackling. And that builds community. That builds the opportunity to contact them again, but it also raises awareness for the issue that you work on. So it's kind of two things at the same time. You do outreach, and people get to know your organization, they decide to donate, and then they feel like they're part of the solution, and the issue that you're dealing with also gets more attention. So that is also very, very helpful to form this kind of community. And it creates long-term loyal supporters. If you do it well, if you inform them, if you keep them in the loop, then you have this group of long-term supporters that can also grow with you. Sometimes people tell me, well, now if I reach out, I can only reach, let's say, young people that are like 25 years old. They're just starting their career. They have no money. Maybe they can give us $2, $3, $10, but what can we do with that? But if you manage to grow this community and they grow with you, at some point they will have more free income, that they can decide what to do with it. At some point they will get to that stage in their lives, in their careers. So building long-term commitment is really key in individual giving. there's one small case study, or there's plenty of examples of where this worked. One is the Change for Good campaign by UNICEF. UNICEF, obviously a huge organization, and they do apply for lots of grants and get a lot of funding through that channel. But they also work with many individual donors. So they worked together with airlines and had the opportunity to distribute their materials in all the planes, I think, and airports. And so they collected millions of dollars through small donations. So every dollar counts, and it is true. I know it sounds like a stupid sentence, but it's true in the end, because if you get 1 million people to give you $1, you still have $1 million. And of course, UNICEF has a very high reach. They had tons of opportunities that we as small NGOs don't have. But still, we also have our networks. We also have many people in our network, and it can also still work for us to raise a significant amount, maybe not millions, but maybe thousands. And that's also going to help us a lot. So when I talk to organizations about individual giving, some of them give me these answers and feel, yeah, maybe shy and maybe some hesitation towards individual giving. So a very common barrier that we see is that they say we feel shy asking for money. We don't want to be begging. We don't want to be asking people for contributions, especially not if they're in my personal network maybe, or if they are connected to the target groups you're working with, because you're out there wanting to help those target groups, but at the same time you're asking for money. It doesn't go together. But in reality, I think the mindset shift is very important, to say you're not asking for yourself, but you're asking on behalf of the cause. And many people also do want to contribute. They see things, they see issues in this world, and they want to be part of the solution. I donate to a lot of charities in my private life, and it makes me feel a little bit better about the situation that we're in. So, for example, in Germany right now, we have a difficult political situation that is kind of drifting into a direction that I really don't like. And I feel like, okay, I can talk to people, I can go out and represent my values, but what else can I do? So I'm donating to organizations that work to strengthen our democracy, and that makes me feel good. When something really bad happens, a catastrophe, and I don't know what to do, I don't know how to support these people, giving a donation gives me the opportunity to feel better about myself. So asking for donations is nothing selfish. It actually gives people an opportunity to get a buy-in and to feel like they can do something to solve the issue. And it's actually something good. It's an opportunity that is shown. Many people really are looking for that and want that. And the sentence at the bottom, I think this is true in so many circumstances, but we have to keep telling ourselves this. If you don't ask, the answer is already no. So really, yeah, go after opportunities. And the worst thing that people can tell you is, no, not right now, or maybe they will give you another connection. Maybe they will just outright say, no, I don't want to support this project. But well, then you move on, you don't ask them again. It's not the end of the world. But getting out there and trying something is always a great start. So how to do it? The first thing that I always share is to say, tell stories. Tell great stories and make sure that people understand what you do. Because a story is something that we know and that is interesting and that is a buy-in. If you just talk about an issue that is very big and you pull out numbers and you say so many X% of communities are underserved, so many children are dying because of malnourishment, there's no 10,000 people are going hungry, etc. That is very bad, but the human brain cannot relate to that. It's so abstract, such a big group of people, so we don't understand what that actually means. We understand it at the rational level, but not at the emotional level. But if you bring stories into the mix, if you tell the story of one person who is going hungry, or one person who couldn't reach the hospital, because there was no closer hospital, then people are able to feel empathy and to relate to that person, and they understand the issue. So telling stories is very, very important in individual giving and connecting to people, making them want to donate because they want to be a hero. They want to be changing the situation of that person. Storytelling, a very, very important tool in individual giving. We have a storytelling course where we talked for a couple of hours about storytelling that you can, I think, still access. And if you're interested in learning how to tell great stories and how to get people engaged with your communities, with the people you work with and work for, I recommend you check out that course because, yeah, it's very impactful. Maybe my team can share it in the chat if that is possible. Another thing that you really have to think about is how can you make it easy for people to give money to you. So, of course, the easiest way usually is through online systems. Again, I know that not in all of the countries that you work in, the online systems are working well and are available for everyone, but usually there's some kind of solution for that, to use an online platform, to use QR codes, to make it easy to do a bank transfer, etc. If they should give you cash, also make that easy, make that transparent, so that people don't feel like the money is going somewhere and they don't understand where it's going. But make sure that they get a receipt, that they get some kind of document that tells them what's happening with the money, etc. But make it as easy as possible, because we know that from marketing, and we also know that from fundraising. If someone is interested in giving to you, if there's barriers, every barrier kind of weeds out people again that then don't do it. If someone is interested in donating to you and the donation page on your website is like 3 clicks away, you will lose 50% of people on the way, because they're not going to do those 3 clicks, because in today's world of information overload, that is already enough to deter someone from wanting to contribute. So make it as easy as possible. Offer options. People can give one time, monthly, in kind. It's also a very good idea to already give, if you're thinking about an online form, a crowdfunding platform, etc., to give them amounts that they can donate, because if you leave that completely open, people might decide to give less. But if you say for 12 euros, we can feed 10 kids for a day, then they might give the 12 instead of 10, which they would have given usually. And then think about stewardship and how you can implement that in your organization. Say thank you, give updates, be transparent about this, because when people decide to give you their individual money, they feel very vulnerable. They made a decision to give their hard-earned money to your cause. So they feel like you also have to show what you're doing with it. Transparency really is key. If they get a feeling that you're not being transparent, that you're doing something wrong with the money, you will lose people forever. And so then all your hard work is for nothing. So to be careful that you're as transparent as possible. About crowdfunding, I've mentioned that a couple of times. That can be a very, very good way to raise money, online especially. And if you want to learn more about that, we also have webinars and I think also a course on crowdfunding that you can watch and where you can get some information about how to set up a crowdfunding campaign. When is the right time to ask? Now, I mean, by coincidence, really now, because end of the year, December is the strongest donation month in the entire year, because Christmas is coming up, the end of the year. People are looking at their budget, maybe realizing, oh, we have some money left. Businesses as well. This is the time to ask them. Again, Christmas is a very, very strong driver for donations. Many people give a Christmas donation. Some decide every year where that donation goes. So now is the time to get there. But even if I was giving this webinar in July, I would tell you now, because if you think about starting individual giving in your organization, setting it up, etc., just get started. Just make some experiences, set up a structure, and just start. Because You will learn along the way and you will gather more experience. And it's always good to just get started and collect those experiences. If you have something important that that you did, some huge success, some event, of course, that is also something that can give you a push in reaching out. And particularly if there's a crisis, an emergency, a natural catastrophe, those are very strong times for individual giving. Unfortunately, unfortunately, because it's a bad circumstance that brings this about. But of course, it's easier if you already have structures in place to start collecting money if this happens. I have this example that I used to work in Nepal for a long time, and we had an NGO, we had a crowdfunding campaign sitting there. It went relatively well, but we were working in agriculture, agroforestry, everything just like kind of plodding along. And then the earthquake happened. And because we were already in Nepal and we had everything set up, we had a crowdfunding page, we had our structures, we were able to accept donations, everything was set up. Very quickly, within a day, the team in Germany made a new crowdfunding campaign for earthquake support, and all the structures were there. So we got a lot of donations during that time because we were one of the first organizations who had set up something to receive those donations. So that is always very helpful. And of course, people are more prone to give when something bad happened, like a war, a natural catastrophe, a flooding, an earthquake, etc. So one example for that is the Red Cross, who always has those appeals immediately after disasters. They're very fast in that. They ask very targeted for what they need, and that leads to huge results. They always have some of the biggest donations after these natural disasters. So there's some big organizations that you can learn from that have different systems set up. Charity Water is an organization, I think they're registered in the UK, and they work for wash projects. Mainly, I think they started with drilling fountains for better water supply in African countries, and now they have plenty of livelihood projects as well, and they have very strong storytelling ideas. If you can watch their YouTube channel, you can find so many great ideas for storytelling, and you see how they use storytelling, visual storytelling, to become very transparent about how they work, what happens with the donations, what happens with the money, where they get their money from, etc. So that really makes them stand out, and it gives them a lot of edge in this field, and many people donate to them because they really like this kind of transparency and this kind of deep look into the work they do. Another example is Save the Children. They have chosen to develop a monthly giving program to have long-term funding. I mean, basically that is the model behind it, because they want to attract more regular donors that give every month or every year, because that is how you can achieve sustainability and be able to plan in the midterm, at least, with donations as well, because they don't come in whenever they want, but you have people who give every month, and then you can plan with that kind of money. So they organize the child sponsorship program. So you sponsor individual children with a specific amount per year or per month. And this is long term. People usually stick with that. They don't say, okay, I supported this kid for a year and now I'm just going to stop. Usually they develop some kind of relationship with that child through letters, etc. And then they stick with it and stay with it. Greenpeace is following a different system. They have a lot of digital campaigns that are great, lots of digital material, but also a lot of street fundraising still. Here in Europe, in Germany, when I go out and I go shopping, I always find Greenpeace people in the shopping street, and they ask people on the street if they want to support, if they want to give some money, and that is how they make this cold contact, which is great because you immediately have an individual connection because you're talking to a person, and you can make that individual connection. So those are 3 strategies of big organizations that you can learn from. Again, you don't have the budget to produce videos like Charity Water, and you probably don't have the budget or the opportunity to develop a child sponsorship program like Save the Children, but you can take ideas from that. Maybe you can use storytelling tools to show how you work, who you work with, success stories, your impact, but also how you work with money. You could also create some kind of sponsorship program, maybe not with children because that is very complicated and it also involves a lot of security issues, but maybe someone could take a sponsorship for a tree or for a part of a school building or a part of a hospital build or something like that. And also the digital engagement strategy that Greenpeace follows is very good. They are everywhere. They are on social media. They are also included in sometimes controversial discussions, which gives them a lot of visibility. That can also, it's a risky strategy and you really have to decide if you want to do that, but that it can also help you to become more known and to reach more people. The key is to build strong and long-term donor relationships. It's with foundations, it's the same, but with individuals even more. So try to move those relationships from transactional, they give you something, you do something, to relational, that you understand each other and you work together so they become long-term supporters. It's very important to have regular communication, and that can be standardized. It can be a newsletter that all your donors are on. It can be a WhatsApp group that you invite everyone to and you share updates in that group, so then everybody can be updated if they want to. But you need to update regularly so that people know what is happening. Also inform them about roadblocks, even if things don't work exactly the way that you wanted it to or you wanted them to. Still update them so that they know what's happening. Celebrate donors if they want that, but if they share their birthday, if they share whatever, they're donating money to you because they retire. They say, oh, I've worked for 20 years, for 40 years, 50 years, and now I'm retiring, and I for that event, I'm donating to your organization. Well, then I want a congratulations to your retirement message. So you really have to try to understand the donors and see if there's anything that you can connect with them over. And understand that they are partners and people and not ATM machines. Because if you just think about them as money machines, then you will lose them very quickly. But if you see them as people, try to connect with them on a human level, then they will stick with you. Now we have some tips for how you can get started and approach individuals. Usually it's a good idea to start with your network. Family and friends, you have to decide if you want to include them in your work or not. Sometimes it can make sense, especially maybe for Christmas. I always start some kind of campaign for the organization that I volunteer for. For example, a couple of years ago, I said, okay, let's not pack our Christmas gifts in inexpensive wrapping paper, but let's all just use newspaper, and the money we would have spent for wrapping paper we donate. Of course, nobody spends that much money on wrapping paper, but then people gave 20, 10, $30, and then in the end we had a couple of $100 anyways. Not because we would spend that money on wrapping paper, but because people were thinking about the project suddenly and thinking about their sustainability as well. And then they decided, oh, I'm going to give a donation. We still had wrapping paper, but just to give you an idea of some things that you can tie this to. That can be an option, but of course you don't have to mix private life and work if you don't want to. But your community that you live in, maybe alumni of your university, other networks that you're part of, and also the people that attend your projects, they can also share, even if maybe they don't have the resources to donate to your project, but they can still share a donations campaign. Maybe they again have people in their network that do have financial capacity. So use the networks that you already have, because you have networks. Maybe you're not considering them as networks that are great for individual giving, but you do have networks and you can start with those. Digital is probably the way to go, especially if you also want to reach people that are outside of your community. So you need a good website where you can donate, newsletters, social media for outreach and updates. You should choose strategically which social media channels you want to use. Don't use all of them, but check what you can and what you want to feed. Because it's always better to have 2 or even 1 social media channel that is current, where you share stuff and are active on, than having 5 that you're not active on. Try to target strategically. So if you have the time and the resources to do that, think about, okay, we have this group of people that sometimes give money to us. How can we transfer them into recurring donors? What could be interesting for them? Which kind of system could we offer them? Or how could we address major donors? How could we address maybe businesses that have that are moving around that kind of money, that have the capacity and the interest, etc. Crowdfunding is a good way, I think, to enter this. Platforms like Global Giving can also give you the opportunity to connect globally. Again, if you want to learn more about that, we have some offers for that as well. Value every donor, no matter how much they gave. So again, you don't need to write a personalized thank you letter if someone gave you $10, but a standardized one has to go out. Because if people don't feel appreciated for what they do, they will step away very, very quickly. And if someone gave something special, doesn't even have to be something with a high monetary value, but if they did something great for you, or if they gave something that was worth a lot to them, thank them individually, because that way you establish that kind of relationship. And keep records. That is very important. Maintain the contacts for future engagement. So whenever someone donates to you through a crowdfunding campaign, make sure that you have their email, that you have ideally the amount that they gave, the timing that they gave, etc., so that you have information and can contact them again. So don't be shy. Your mission deserves funding, and there's plenty of people out there that that are interested in giving. And many, many people in, for example, Europe or the US want to give to small grassroots NGOs in the countries that some of the issues are that we're dealing with, because they don't want to be giving to those big NGOs. They want to know that the money really has impact, and you are the ones that have the impact. So making the connection is key. Don't be shy, get out there, and I'm sure you can find supporters. Start small and test, learn, and grow. So it's not bad if you make a mistake, if you're open about it, I think. Even if you forget to write a thank you letter, well, then once you notice, get back to that person and say, oh, I'm so sorry, we were setting up a system. I missed you. I missed this. I missed sending out the letter, but I'm sorry for this. And this is the explanation. If you're open, I think people will also forgive mistakes. So it's always better to start something that is not perfect than to never start anything, because it's never perfect. And you also have to build trust through transparency. This is key. People give their private money and they really want to see what you do with it. And the more you're able to show what the impact is and what is happening with the money, the more people will trust you. And in the end, every rupee or every dollar or every euro counts, because the collective power of individuals is huge. If you have 100 people in your network and everyone just gives $1, that's still $100 with money that you can often already achieve something with. And if you have 1,000 people in your network and everybody gives $1, you're already at 1,000. So that collective power is there, and it's really, really worth it. Yeah, with that, we're coming to the end of the presentation. I just want to share some info about some of the courses that we offer at Philanthropia. Maybe you already know a couple of those, but just reminding you. For example, we have the course that I mentioned, Storytelling and Fundraising, on our page. So if you go to philanthropia.org, you can find that course. Mastering budgets, etc. A lot of this stuff is focused on proposal writing, but like I said, storytelling, I think, is crucial and key for individual giving, because that is how you can connect with people, and that is how you can make sure they have an emotional connection with your project. And because you joined this webinar, we also have a great offer for you. And you can get any course, the storytelling course as well, at 35% off. So if you use the coupon code fundraise for anything on our website, you will get 35% off. So I really recommend you check that out, and I hope you can find something interesting. Yeah, with that, coming to the end of today's presentation, if you have questions, please feel free to use either the chat now, because then I can find it, or to use the Q&A box. So there's one question, how to approach and motivate philanthropic donors to fund work for addressing the root causes of the problem rather than the direct financial aid to the victims. Yeah, that is sometimes a bit more complicated, because often it's easier to raise funds for the people that are in the situation. So for children or people that are in need. But I think if you explain very well why the root cause is the thing that needs to change, I think you can move people from there. So, for example, you could use storytelling, and let's say you, just making it up, let's say you work in the education sector, and you want to change policy in school because that policy leads to issues for the kids. You could still use storytelling tools and have a kid talk about their situation at school and explain why your contribution would change their situation. So I think you can still center it around the target groups, but include parts that explain why it would be beneficial to their situation if those root causes were addressed. I hope I'm making myself clear. So trying to make that connection, and that is something that you can also do very well with storytelling, because otherwise it often, especially those more systemic things, often stay very, very theoretic, and kind of hover at that higher level. But if you're able to break that down and make that connection between the root cause and the person that will benefit from it in the end, and the impact that it will have through storytelling, for example, I think that is very strong in this. Yeah, I don't see any more questions at the moment. Thank you so much for taking part in this. We will share the recording, so you will get that in your inbox, I think either today or tomorrow, so that you can also share that with other people if you want to. You can also check out our YouTube channel for more webinars that we have done in the past, and make sure that you follow us there as well, because we've shared tons of resources on that YouTube page as well already. Perfect. Okay. Well, then I think we there's no more questions. I'm happy that this was useful for you, that you were able to take away from this. Please stay in touch. We will be offering more webinars over the course of the next months. And thank you so much. All the best for all your campaigns. I hope you can ramp up your Christmas fundraising and get some individual donors up for that. And thank you very much again. See you soon. See you next time. Bye-bye.